Elizabeth Bathory, History, Accusations, and Legend. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel if you are new and leave a like on the video. Now let's start. She was known throughout the Kingdom of Hungary as Elizabeth Bathory, a noblewoman of immense wealth, lineage, and influence. Yet history does not remember her for her aristocratic power, but for what happened behind the cold stone walls of Countess Castle. How could a countess, born into one of the most powerful families of 16th century Central Europe, become synonymous with cruelty? Born in 1560, Elizabeth Bathory belonged to the elite Bathory family, relatives of kings, cardinals, and military commanders. She was highly educated, spoke several languages, and was married to Ferenc Nadasdy, a decorated general known as the Black Knight of Hungary. Upon Ferenc's death in 1604, Elizabeth assumed control of vast estates. But it was what happened next that turned the whispers into legend. For years, rumors spread of young peasant women entering his service and never returning. Was she a sadistic murderer or the victim of a political plot to take away her lands? The truth lies between verifiable facts and centuries of legend. But one thing is certain: she was tried not as a criminal, but as a threat to the nobility. In the eyes of the peasants, receiving an invitation to work in the countess's house seemed like a rare occasion. Girls between the ages of 10 and 18 were recruited with the promise of employment as maids, assistants, or seamstresses. Some were sent by their families themselves with the hope of a better future. But often, what seemed like a step toward social mobility was just the beginning of a trap. The Bathory castle was run under strict control. Once inside, the girls were isolated from the outside world. Letters went unanswered, visits were denied, and silence became the norm. Witnesses described how trusted servants, including a local woman named Anna Darvulia, helped run the deception. Even though the nobility was largely untouchable, voices began to grow louder. More and more families were wondering what had happened to their daughters. The church began to take an interest. In a 1609 letter, Lutheran minister István Magyari asked the king for an investigation into what he called inhuman cruelty. Among the most disturbing accusations are those related to bathing rituals inside the castle. According to testimonies collected in the 1611 investigation, some servants said that the countess orchestrated violent acts in rooms closed with tiles. Hot water was used in ways far from hygienic. Over time, the myth spread that she bathed in blood to stay young. This legend has fascinated storytellers for centuries, but no trial documents confirm it. In reality, the myth of the bloodbath appears only decades later. However, testimonies speak of bathtubs and victims being tied up during punishments. Some claimed that Bathory displayed an eerie calm, as if everything were normal. Whether it was ritual or punishment, what happened in those rooms left a trail of witnesses, some accomplices, others shocked. And although myth has obscured reality, the documented facts themselves remain disturbing. Those baths were not legends. They were real accusations within one of the most infamous noble investigations in European history. Among the most shocking accusations were those related to punishments with cold. During the freezing Hungarian winters, some girls were left naked in the snow as a form of punishment or control. According to court records, multiple servants described girls being forced to stand outside, often doused with buckets of ice water. Countess Castle in the Little Carpathians was known for its harsh winters. These acts were seen as deliberately cruel displays of power. Witnesses, including Ilona Joe, one of the countess's closest aides, confirmed the practice. Some modern scholars hypothesize that certain testimonies were obtained under pressure. But the consistency between the accounts suggests a credible basis. The aim, it was said, was to inflict pain without direct confrontation, to let nature do the punishing. According to one account, Elizabeth observed the punishments from afar, coldly giving orders. Whether they were common practices or isolated incidents, they helped paint a disturbing portrait. A noblewoman whose sense of discipline bordered on torture. When she was arrested in December 1610, the ensuing investigation shook the entire Hungarian aristocracy. Over 300 witnesses and survivors were heard during the inquiry led by György Thurzó, Palatine of Hungary. The testimonies were not only numerous, but were striking for their coherence and detail. Servants, officials, and peasants recounted a pattern of torture, forced starvation, and imprisonment. Some claim to have found diaries with the names of the victims, perhaps over 600, but no such book has ever been found. It is one of the most discussed elements of the case. Under oath, many confessed to having participated in or covered up the punishments. Despite possible pressure, the accumulation of testimonies was decisive for the conviction. However, Elizabeth Bathory was never publicly tried. As a noblewoman, her status protected her from a real trial. She was sentenced to house arrest, walled up alive in a room of her castle, where she died in 1614. His accomplices were executed. For her, justice was political, silent, and strategic. A punishment confined between stone walls. Comment below, was it an isolated monstrosity or the product of a brutal and indifferent era? As Thurzó wrote to King Matthias in 1611, "We caught her red-handed, egregium tamen apprehendimus." The figure of Elizabeth Bathory continues to fluctuate between myth and reality, black legend and historical documentation. It is difficult to distinguish precisely where the truth ends and the narrative construction around the Blood Countess begins. But beyond the most macabre rumors, there remains a disturbing picture of abuse, disappearances, and power exercised without limits. Whether she was a sadistic serial killer or a noblewoman caught up in a political conspiracy for the control of her lands, one thing is certain. Her case revealed how deeply intertwined justice was at the time, with power, gender, and social status. While her accomplices were publicly executed, she was walled up alive in her own castle, punished, yes, but according to the rules of her caste. Her story is a warning about how easily cruelty can hide behind respectability, and how the victims, often young and forgotten, are the first to disappear not only from the news, but also from memory. And for this very reason, today more than ever, it is worth remembering them. That's all for today. And what do you think of this story? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new. See you next time. Bye.